Welcome back. We apologize for the system freezing up. We are back live, everybody, so we'll start the meeting all over again. Where we left off, it is we're starting back up at 6:40. We took a brief intermission due to our live feed freezing up on us, but we are now back up. So Superintendent Legallo will continue, and he'll brief you back to the item that he was talking about prior to us freezing up, so to make sure nobody on our live feed has missed anything.
So back to the survey. So we had surveyed and asked grade levels of our students. Hold on 1 second. Okay, confirming that we're back. Great, thank you. So we had asked for the grade level of the students, and so we had about 40% of our families tell us that at this point in time they would be keeping their children at home to continue remote learning, and 60% would be sending their kids to school if things stayed the same for the fall. And certainly that is significant information for us as we continue our planning. The other piece of information we had asked about was transportation. At the time, we were told that we were only going to be allowed 11 students on the bus, and we had about 38% of our parents tell us the bus was the only way they could get their students to school at this point, and 62% said that they could find alternative transportation. We do have an update on that. I did talk with the bus company today, and we are up to 24 students now, which is much better than 11 for sure. Yeah. And it's likely that that will even go a little bit higher once they clarify that siblings will be able to sit together. That live together, siblings that live together would probably be able to sit together as well. So that might help us in that situation as well. And then the last question that we had asked on this survey was about the internet capabilities at home. And it was about what we expected. About 89% said their internet is solid. About 9 or 10% said the internet was unreliable. I talked to Robin about that, and she said typically that means that at times it gets choppy, but typically it still works. And then we had a very small slice, and I don't even know what percent that would be. I didn't do the math on it, but we had maybe 1 or 2 families reported they didn't have internet. So certainly we'll try to reach out to them and mitigate those issues as well. So I share all that information for you because it's very important to have that information as you go through the planning process that we're going through. So I'll ask Drew to turn it over to our planning document. You all have access to this document. The administrators have access to this document. The entire district has access to this document. I've made this a public document to all of our staff, to the board, and to the administration that's working on this at this point. The reason why we've designed the document this way is we wanted to show you our progress as we plan. We developed one plan to cover all possibilities. So the latest and greatest information comes up at the top of each box, and it's color coded so you know where we're at what time of the, at what date we're on. So we started this planning back at the end of June. We've had several meetings. You can see the updates in the different colors, and as information comes to us, we capture that information. We ask a lot of questions that need to be answered, and at some point in time we'll have to answer all these questions together for you so that you can make a great decision about what we're going to end up doing once we get to August is the plan. We've broken it down by specific areas so we can keep it organized. We did have discussions in the communications meeting that Delaney had set for us last week about whether or not this document should be shared to the entire community. I have mixed feelings about that. I was a strong proponent of that at first, but I think it might be difficult to share something like this with them, not understanding how it's laid out and the type of information that's in it. Some might interpret it as decisions being made that haven't been made yet. So we decided at the communications meeting that I would continue to update the public every 2 weeks with exactly where we're at. So for instance, I will write a letter to them tomorrow talking about the survey results and sharing the survey results with them. Probably telling them that I'll share the governor's update with them as well, trying to keep the public as informed as we can as we go through. What I was hoping to do tonight is just to go through each section, not to reread it or anything, but just to talk about some of the highlights and maybe some of the latest information that we're getting in terms of these areas, but also so the public has a chance, any of the public that's watching this gets a sense of what we're doing. This is a 30-page document at this point that we've come up with after only 3 meetings. So it will continue to grow. And like I said, the idea is to have one plan that will cover all scenarios so that if something happens and we have to pivot, we don't have to go to a different plan. We just continue to work off the plan we have and pivot to whatever we need to do. For instance, if we reopen and we have some of our kids coming to school and we have some of our kids at home, if we get cases of COVID, what do we do in terms of notification? What do we do in terms of closure? Whether we close the classroom, whether we close the school, whether we close the district, all those sorts of things. This plan should encompass all of that stuff so that people are aware this is what we're going to be doing and this is how the notifications will happen, this is how the process will work, so that people are comfortable knowing that we have a good plan in place. That's the purpose of this document, so people know. It's not to lean towards one scenario or another. We're planning for all scenarios for you. And then ultimately you guys will be the ones that will decide what scenario you want to implement at what time. So our first section is technology. Certainly the technology section has to do with lots of different things. I mean, the biggest one to start with was the Chromebooks. You did vote to buy the 285 Chromebooks. So you put out about $84,000 of the CARES money, probably out of the CARES money for that. Tonight we were going to ask about $12,000 for Chromebook covers, because if we're going to have kids bringing these back and forth or taking them home, we probably should protect the investment and get covers for them. The discussion amongst the admin team and with Robin, and Robin can jump in if she wants to, but the discussion was that we would have kids taking these back and forth from school, because we can't really use the carts and have the kids commingling and pushing all their stuff into the cart and touching it. That they would have to bring them home every night and charge them at home, come back to school. Those that were staying at home remote would have them at home anyways. Kids that were coming to school would bring them to school, use them, bring them home, and in the event of some closure or something, they would have them on them already. They would be able to jump right into remote learning. So we felt the investment was worth $12,000 to get the covers for them, to protect them. But obviously it's over 10 grand, so we need to bring that to the board.
All right. You got a question, Delaney?
Yeah, how was the ordering going on the new Chromebooks? I know there were some supply issues initially, and what are we looking at for supply issues with the protective covers for the Chromebooks?
Robin, did you hear any of that?
The group is trying to reach through. You might want to go. Yeah, you might want to stop sharing for a minute. They're having difficulty with audio. Robert, do you have audio problems?
Yeah. There's nothing on this here.
Sorry. Everything's working great. Give me a second, folks. How's that? No,
I can hear
no,
on
we
my
can't hear
computer,
you.
but it's not coming through there.
Give me a sec. Murphy's Law, right? You hear me now? Let's have it muted. How's that? No? Could somebody try to reply to me, please? Could you guys hear me?
Looks like not.
Can you hear me now? It worked earlier.
Yeah.
How's that? I can't hear you guys. Yeah, it's all the way up.
It's on 94. Now I do.
No.
Can you hear me now? Because that was on that. Can you hear me now? Let's
Yes, I
start.
can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What do we go back to now?
How's that?
Perfect, I can hear you.
Robin, if I can just interrupt you for a second, I know there's been some, I've got a few text messages. Can everybody hear us up down here at the library now? Okay, I'm seeing a shaking of heads of yes from everybody.
Can you reply?
Yeah.
Because we
Yes.
want to hear your voice.
Yeah, I just need
Okay.
everybody to reply that you can hear me. Kathy, can
Yes.
you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Jefferson.
Yes.
Okay, Kathy's there, Toby, Carrie?
Yes.
Yep.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Deb. Rebecca?
Yep.
Okay, Rebecca's a thumbs up. Susan?
Yep.
Both Susans? Good. All right, so everybody, we're back up live, so my apologies, we lost the speaker for a second, but Ken came back and saved us again. So Robin, did you hear the question that Delaney had asked? Did you get any of that?
I did not.
All right, so I will ask, Delaney has a question for you, so I'll have him repeat it and let you answer it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Delaney.
I was asking on the status of ordering the replacement Chromebooks and what the status of inventory-wise, because I know there were some backlogs on ordering. And so for the Chromebooks and for the protective coverings, what the wait time might be on those.
The Chromebooks themselves, we've actually received them. It looks like we're gonna have enough inventory as long as the maybe 65 left that haven't been returned get returned. We should be all set. Even without those, I think we're gonna be perfectly fine with what we need to go forward. The cases, I just need an okay. I've got to get our name on the list for the cases. They're back ordered. My vendor reached out to me today and said we need to get the order placed so that we're in line when the back order does come in, which should be this month.
So we have so you've already gotten the 285 Chromebooks that we ordered that we approved for?
Yes, they came in last week while I was on vacation.
All right. So how many covers do you need?
I'm gonna estimate we need 1,000. That gives us enough of a buffer for any added kids that come in. That would be $12,000. They are $12 a piece. They're a really good deal. They're a good padded neoprene case with a zipper pocket on the front for the power cord and a little handle to carry them, as well as a shoulder strap.
All right. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Delaney? Does anybody else have any questions pertaining to the laptops or to the request by the superintendent for the covers for the Chromebooks? Does any school board member have any other further questions on that? All right, if not, I'll take a motion if we want to accept these and approve the orders.
I make a motion, Tim,
Go ahead,
to
Deb.
expend up to $12,000 for 1,000 Chromebook cases.
Okay, so Deb's made the motion to approve up to $12,000 for 1,000 Chromebook cases. Do I have a second? Second by Chris Nealon. Do I have any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, if Kathy, if I could have a roll call vote?
Tim Dow,
Yes.
Scott Burns,
Yes.
Paul Doucette,
Yes.
Chris Nealon,
Yes.
That was a
Cecile
yes.
Cormier,
Yes.
Jeff Savory,
Yes.
Delaney Courier,
Yes.
Susan Hallett Cook,
Yes.
and Deb Brown. Yes.
Motion passes unanimously for the approval of up to $12,000 for 1,000 Chromebook covers.
Okay, thank you. So the other conversation we were having about technology, Robin and I today, was about bandwidth of the schools and how many kids or how many adults could be Zooming out or Google Meeting out to the world at the same time before our internet infrastructure wouldn't be able to handle it. So I said, for a scenario, I said if every classroom was Zooming at the same time, for lack of a better way of describing it, would we be able to do that if we had everyone in their rooms doing it? And she responded, and she can speak to this, but you know, if there weren't other kids doing a lot on their Chromebooks at the time, then she didn't believe we would have a lot of issues with that. It would limit what we could do with kids in the school at that time if everybody was doing it at the same time. We're not suggesting that's what we're doing. We're just trying to get what are our abilities with our current infrastructure. We talked about, is there a way to increase the bandwidth? And we really, what that would require tons of work and tons of money, was her description to me. So do you want to talk to that, Robin, at all?
So to increase the bandwidth, unfortunately, our entire infrastructure would have to be replaced. Right now, we have what's called Category 5 cable throughout the school that's going overhead in the ceilings and through all the conduits. The max you can get for service with that kind of cable is 1 gigabyte, which is what we already currently have. So to go ahead with a faster internet speed and actually get the faster internet speed, it would require us to completely overhaul the infrastructure of the wiring of the school. Not really a doable thing at this point. It would take months. I mean, you'd have to do every single school. It would be very extensive, 6 months to a year at best case scenario to get that kind of cabling done, especially since there's other schools looking for it to find the contractors that we could even get. So with 1 gigabit, I personally think we will be okay if we all follow certain parameters and rules as far as the kids having times that we do our online streaming, taking attendance, setting up the assignments. Once the assignments are set up, then the kids can go to work and the teacher won't be live streaming. We have a good separation in our wireless access points. I honestly think we'll be okay. We're working on another project over the summer, which is gonna help us. We can actually take and individually throttle just all the Chromebooks during the time the teachers are live streaming, meaning they won't get much internet. We'll dedicate it to the streaming, and then when the streaming is over, it can be released to give the kids the internet they need to do what they need to do. There's a lot of creative ways we can handle it.
So let me just be clear, we're just talking about what's our capacity at this point. We're not suggesting that we have any ideas about how we're gonna do this at this point. Just what is the capacity? What can we do physically around this?
Right, and with 1 gigabit, I think personally we can handle it at this point.
Yeah. Do we have, other than bandwidth, the technical capability to like Zoom all of our classes from all of our classrooms? Do we have the technology in every classroom to do that?
That's what we're talking about right now, Delaney. So at this point in time, what we would have is a laptop that a teacher would have to be in front of, and would have kids in the classrooms potentially, and then kids that would be home potentially. We don't have these devices, although we talked about it, that we could potentially get a device like this. There's other potential devices that we could purchase depending on how robust we wanted to get into.
So we don't have those pieces now.
We don't. And
So that's additional expenditures to
There is,
Up to that speed.
and one of the difficulties of this whole thing is going to be, at what point do we want to start expending significant money, not knowing or knowing what the situation is going to be? I mean, I'll give you an example. We have not purchased any PPE yet. And the reason we haven't done that yet is because we were waiting to see, one, is the state was gonna provide it. But two, if we're going fully remote, we don't need the PPE like we would if everybody's coming back to school. So we don't want to be expending thousands and thousands of dollars on things until we're really sure about what direction it is we're going to try and go in. So that's kind of like why we're going through this process. And at what point are we comfortable? Like the Chromebook covers, we're comfortable with that because we're going to use them either way. Whether we're here or whether we're remote, we're going to need to use those. The kids are going to be bringing them back and forth. That ship has sailed at this point. So that makes sense to me. The fact that we bought the Chromebooks, that makes sense. Because they're going to use them one way or the other. Now we start to get into the things around, are we ready to make significant investments in things? Do we have the decisions made that we want, and are we going to go that route? I'm not ready to commit to any of those. That's why I'm really being careful about what we're saying right now, because no decision's been made about how we're going to deliver remote instruction and in-person instruction potentially at the same time. That has not been vetted yet by us, by the administration team, nor with the teachers at all. It needs to be worked through to figure out what's the best way to do that. We're just trying to look at capabilities at this point and what does our infrastructure handle. So I don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Robin has a question. Go ahead, Robin.
The other thing to consider is every classroom does have a projector, and every laptop is capable of connecting to the projector, which is going to join the kids that are remote with the kids that are in the classroom and give it a full classroom appeal. And that's not going to cost us anything. We already have that equipment in every classroom, and it should help tremendously in that respect.
That help, Delaney?
Yeah, absolutely.
For instance, one of these devices here, we could probably get for $100. Right.
We get it less now, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So according to Ken, I talked to him before the meeting, if we could get something like this for $100, put that in every classroom in the district potentially, and you've got a little more robust ability to do that, potentially, as an example.
So it sounds like we at least have a baseline to start from, so.
Yes, and that's what we were working off of. So, Robin, any other technology pieces as to where we're at this point?
No, the only other thing left is to drop some kind of plan for parental permission and insurance as a possibility, but other than that, no, that's pretty much it. The Chromebook cases are the big thing to help protect the Chromebooks.
And one thing to add, we will have the ability this year to have the Chromebook cameras on using Google Meet. So you might remember last year it was all, they had to use their own devices at home because of the issue. Well, with Google Meet this year, we have the capability to shut off individual cameras. So if a kid does something we don't like, we can shut that student's camera down without shutting down everybody else's. So now the Chromebooks with Google Meet, it doesn't work with Zoom, but it will work with Google Meets. The likelihood is we'll be pushing Google Meet with all of our staff because of that reason, and we can use the Chromebooks to do that. So that's a significant improvement as well. So just want to make sure people are aware of that.
Robin's better.
Go ahead, Robin.
And Google Meet this year is coming out with pretty much all the extras Zoom had already given us, the breakout classrooms, all of the different features that everybody had wanted because Zoom had it. Google Meet said before the end of this calendar year, it will have all of those features too. So that's another big help. It uses less resolution, which means it's also going to help for bandwidth as well.
Thank you, Robin.
All right, if we go back to the plan then, without crashing the system, hopefully. No, just each section. Oh, okay. We're going to just give you the latest update.
All right, so are we done with technology?
We're done with the technology.
All right, so the next section was facilities.
So this next section is facilities, and obviously Toby and Jefferson play a big role in this. One of the first things we looked at was what are the guidelines in terms of social distancing in the classroom, and how much space do we have in our classrooms. The guidance we received from the CDC is the 6-foot spacing. So if that spacing stands, we can fit anywhere from 9 to 12 kids in a classroom with removing a lot of the furniture. We had all 3 schools, principals went and looked at the rooms, set up example rooms using cones, what it would look like. Massachusetts came out with guidance that said 3-foot distancing. And I don't know if they just did that because they knew they couldn't fit the kids in with 6-foot distancing. I don't know what they based that off of. I don't know what the governor's gonna come out with tomorrow. But we will have to have some logic behind why we choose whatever it is we choose. We talked about, especially at the elementary school level, needing to reduce the amount of furniture in the classrooms so that we could space kids out and have a lot less surfaces for them to be touching and cleaning and all that. So there's a potential that we may have to get some trailers on site to store all this furniture that we won't be using if we set the rooms up this way. The facilities piece also is involved in cleaning. So we've already purchased 10 disinfectant spray machines for all our custodians that we'll be using. There will be a lot of cleaning schedules that need to be done. There probably will be a look at potentially needing more staff during the day if kids are back in school, because one custodian trying to keep up with the whole school probably isn't viable with the amount of cleaning that may need to be done. The PPE needed falls under the facilities pieces as well. You know, so what PPE do we need to be providing and procuring at this point? So we're looking at all those sorts of things. Certainly the common areas are the big concern. So like we are shutting down all the water fountains so that we won't have any communal access to water fountains. So we'll have to be providing water to kids somehow, bottled water if the kids come back. Bathrooms will need to be sanitized as frequently as possible, for sure. I mean, maybe we identify a couple of bathrooms that are manned and cleaned as kids use them. I mean, these are all things that we're discussing at this point. You know, we're talking a lot about kids staying in their classrooms and not moving, and trying to keep kids in cohort groups, especially at like the elementary school and middle school, so there's no intermingling of kids. So that, in fact, there's a lot less travel in the hallways. There's no use of lockers per se. All these, so I'm trying to give you a flavor of all of the discussions that we're having here in terms of what we would need to do to make it more viable for kids to come back in the building safely. So those are the conversations that are continue to be ongoing at this point. Toby, I don't know if you can hear me, Toby, but I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, basically that covers it. Right now it's a lot of reactionary to what the rules are going to be. We've done most of the cleaning, finishing up on that, and I told the staff to be ready for August 1st for whatever furniture changes, signages, and preps we got to do when we get back. I did price out some trailers today. We could figure about $100 a month per trailer. I'm figuring those are 40 footers. I'm figuring probably at least 6 of those to start with. And here again, that depends on how much furniture we got to remove from the building, depending on how many kids, so and so. So sprayers have been ordered. We're still waiting for those. So yeah, we're just got the basics on order and kind of waiting for the commands here.
The other piece that we're working on is making sure that all the sinks, hand washing sinks, are functioning, especially at the elementary school.
Those are completed. We've
already finished. Great, super.
Yep, we've done all the sinks, we got them all operating, and we've shut down all the water fountains.
I have asked Toby to look into what it would take for us to make all of our sinks and toilets hands-free, in terms of running the electrical and all that piece, to see if that's something viable that we could do to reduce, once again, kids touching surfaces and all that. So he's going to jump on that as well and take a look at what that would take. The obvious concern there is they tend to break down a lot, and with vandalism and whatnot, there's some concern there, but I think we need to at least price it out and see what it would take and what it would cost for us to look at something like that.
I just have a question.
Go ahead, Tim.
On the water part of things, you said you were shutting the water down. Are these, the new water units that we put into the school are hand-free? Are we worried about contamination or the water filling stations that we purchased and put into all the schools?
The guidance that we're receiving from, I think it's either the CDC or DHHS, is that you should not have any communal ability, because if a kid takes a water bottle and sticks it up and touches the thing.
So we're worried about
Contamination,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
You should not have any kind of communal anything. That's why they're saying not to serve lunch in the lunchroom.
Right.
That we should be delivering lunches and all that. There shouldn't be any ability for kids to cross-contaminate or do any of those types of things.
Okay.
I did get a question from a parent about the sprayers. Toby, can you just talk about the chemical that the sprayers spray?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of, spreadsheets here somewhere. Basically, I mean, they gotta meet all the CDC guidelines. I believe this spray here that we have purchased, it can be put on food grade areas, and I think it's like 10 minutes after being used, it's sanitizing. There it is. It's botanical disinfectant solution by BioS. Fights the SARS-CoV-2 for the COVID-19. Meets EPA emerging viral pathogen policy. I mean, I can download this whole, I don't know, pamphlet per se, if you like, for all the data on it.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to send me tomorrow something, Toby, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks, appreciate it. We're also looking into our air handling situation and whether there's something that can be done there. There's companies claiming that they have things that we can do to improve our air handling in terms of killing the virus. And I got to tell you, I'm getting thousands of emails about all
Lost
this stuff.
again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Toby. Did he lose you?
You lost
Can you
the
hear me,
sound
Dan?
again.
I can hear you, Toby. Can he not hear us?
Mm-mm.
People are taking too long. No offense, I hope none is taken.
Okay. I can hear
You can hear us?
you. I can hear you now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So Dan's gonna continue what he was saying.
So I was just talking about some of the things we are hearing about the air handlers and some of the products, and I was just telling everyone, I'm getting thousands of companies reaching out to us to solve all of our problems, so everybody's trying to get in on it, as they said, so.
Those speakers gone a lot of places. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
With the possibly having more employees needed for the facilities and during the day, has any consideration been given to adding a part-time in the evening for each school as well, to help them as well, to alleviate some of that extra deep cleaning that we would have to do at nighttime?
At this point in time, we're considering everything. Honestly, yeah, we really need to know before we go out and hire a bunch of people what we're going to be doing here, because you don't want to go hire a bunch of people and then all of a sudden say we're going to go remote, because then we're paying a bunch of people that we wouldn't really necessarily need. So we're being as cautious as we can, but trying to stay on top of it as fast as we can at the same time. So yes, everything's being considered in terms of personnel, Deb. We just don't want to jump. We don't want to jump until we have a good sense of what direction the board's going to take us in. Okay? Yep. Want to go to the next section?
Transportation is next.
So transportation, we talked a little bit about. 24 is way better than 11. With 11, we would have needed 20 buses and all those drivers, and neither of those exist, by the way, the buses nor the number of drivers we would have needed. With 24 and the potential for siblings sitting together, that's much more doable. We were considering things like before and after school on-site care so that parents could drop kids off early instead of taking buses before they went to work. We can still consider those options as well. Anything we can do to reduce the amount of kids on the bus. Trying to get it down to a regular bus run makes the most sense, obviously, if we can do that. There was a little bit of discussion on the admin team about high school busing, because high school busing is not mandatory in New Hampshire. It's only up through 8th grade. So would you gain anything by not having high school busing? Or would those high school kids have trouble getting to school without that busing? So that's something that's on the table to at least talk about. Nobody's ready to make any recommendation to you on that yet. But certainly with the increase that I heard about today, we're feeling a lot better about transportation. The other piece, by the way, is the special education transportation. We're hearing from that company that right now we can only put 3 students on a bus. So that's the transportation that we use for our preschool students. All of our preschool students get transportation through special education. And then a lot of our special education students get transportation as well. So that's an issue that will need to be dealt with for sure. So Rebecca and I continue to talk and meet with that, but that has some significant impacts as well. So we have not heard an update from them, but we'll continue to work with them to see what we can do, for sure. Part of the issue of kids staying home remotely means if some kids are staying home, some of that transportation issue goes away. You know, so it'll be interesting to see where we fall in terms of if we do open, how many students do come, whether our special education students come or whether some of them decide to stay home as well. So it's a moving target for sure. Moving on, Julie.
Curriculum and instruction.
Jefferson,
He should pop up right here.
you out there, Jefferson?
Yeah.
I didn't know if, I can hear you. We just didn't know if you had anything to add in regards to transportation, anything you've heard at this point?
I haven't heard anything different than what you've heard. Obviously, it all depends on what, like you said, today when the governor spoke to first student directly to change the perspective or protocols on that.
Right. Okay.
So you see what we can do with that. I'm not sure what any other districts are dealing with at this particular moment.
Insight on the maintenance, you want to add anything on the maintenance, he's in charge of managing people.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add on terms of the maintenance or the custodial issues?
Well, as Toby alluded to, it's one of those things where we're trying to do a lot of potential preparatory work and being ready for any scenario that comes up to what the board decides to deal with. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves until we actually have that specific direction. And protocols we want to put in place, whether or not we're going to look at things like face shields or plastic for barriers in classrooms and things of that nature if we're going in school. But a lot of that can be fairly expensive. It's stuff that we could probably potentially use some of those ESSER funds to help alleviate the costs related to those issues. But once again, it's all dependent on which direction we decide to go on.
Okay, thanks, Jefferson. So curriculum and instruction. So we are recommending at this point that we pretty much ask all of our teachers to use Google Classroom to organize around. The reason for that is that should we have to go remote, it'll be easy for kids and parents to access the materials they need to access. They'll be used to using it, whether we're in person, hybrid, or remote. We did purchase Discovery Ed, which we've talked to you about before, but that's an online instructional tool as well. The big issue to resolve or talk about is how to provide remote instruction and in-class instruction at the same time. That is a significant issue that needs to be worked out. So like I said, I'm starting to meet with the teachers group this week, this Thursday, to start looking at scenarios there as well, and what's doable and what's just not doable. So those are the big pieces there. We did deliver remote instruction for the last 3 or 4 months, so we have a really good sense of what we were able to do and what we weren't. The improvement with turning the cameras on will help us a lot. We got a lot of feedback from the faculty about things that we could do to make things better should we be remote again. So we would certainly take action on those things, like providing more regular scheduled times at all the levels and those sorts of things as well. But I want to emphasize, we are planning for all scenarios, because at any given moment, we could be in school, not in school, back in school, half of us here in school, half of us not, when we need to be ready to pivot on all those situations. So that's why we think this planning part will be the best thing to do. If you use Google Classroom, no matter where the kids are, in the school or out of the school, they know how to get access to their learning materials. Teachers know how to get access to them and do the things they need to do. The commissioner is pushing a learning management system statewide that he put an RFP on. He's providing some training sessions in August. A lot of the superintendents are balking at it at this point, saying not necessarily a bad idea, but just the timing of it is very difficult to ask teachers to try and take that on right now with everything else that's going on. He's telling us it's a 3-year agreement that's paid for by the state. I don't think at this point in time jumping full hog into that would make a lot of sense for us. I do think that maybe we should open it up to say to teachers, hey, this is an available thing, like we usually do with things that are new, and have some of our people that are first adopters look at it, learn how to use it, and then instruct us how best to then maybe roll it out later on. But I just want the board to be aware that there's a state initiative there to try and do something like this across the whole state. All right, moving on.
It would be health management.
So health management, we're working with our nurses on this. This has to do with how do you take the temperatures of all the kids before they come in school? Do you try to do that? Do you ask all the questions that we've been asking people to date right now? How do you do that? What's the procedures to do that? What are the other precautions in terms of PPE that you would need to take? What do you do if you have a kid that presents with symptoms in the school? How do you isolate them? How do you protect their anonymity, and their FERPA rights? I'm meeting with the nurses Thursday morning to go over some of this stuff. At this point right now, we have handheld thermometers, so when somebody comes to our doors, the secretaries will hit them on the forehead an inch away, and they'll get a reading. We've been logging all that information. The questions are posted on the door. And that works for right now because we don't have a lot of people coming to the buildings right now. Certainly something like that, when you're trying to bring 1,000 kids into the school, or 600 kids into the school, or 400, or however many, is problematic. I did mention to you earlier, a lot of the superintendents are starting to move away from the temperature piece and looking at other things because of the asymptomatic spread in the younger population that we keep hearing about. I'm not comfortable saying we're not going to do that. I think we need to do something there as well. So we'll continue to work that piece. I'm not thinking we're going to buy the $10,000 thermal scanners for each building. I think that's a little bit too much for us to be doing at this point. I think there's some ways in between to do that. So for instance, if there's kids getting dropped off, let's say, and we buy a bunch of those thermometers, we could hit a kid in the car before the parent lets them out of the car and say, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, perhaps. And if the kid wasn't good, the parent could take them home. In terms of bus stops, there's a lot of debate about, do you hit them at the bus stop before they get on the bus, or do you hit them at the school? The problem with at the bus stop is if a kid has a temperature at the bus stop and there's no parent there, what do? You're stuck. And we're talking about little kids because parents leave the kids there sometimes. So we're looking at ways around that. Do you hit the kids at the school with the bus when they get off the bus? And if they get off the bus with a fever, then you then isolate them in some area outside of the school before they come in. I just want you to know that's the flavor of the conversations with the nurses that we're having, and, you know, what kind of personnel do we need to do that? You know, and if you do that, how many entrances do you have open in the morning when kids arrive? Kind of what you were talking about earlier, Chris, you know, you can't have 200 kids standing at one entrance all congregating, waiting to have their temperature taken. That's just, I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of keeping kids apart. So we're trying to work logistics out around those as well. The other piece about this is how to handle positive cases. Should we get a positive case of a student or a staff member? And how do you handle that in terms of, do we notify the kids in the class if it's a student or a teacher? Do we close down the whole school? Does the whole district close down? So all those protocols that we would need in place so people would know that if there is some type of situation that we have, that they would be well informed about what was happening and not be left in the dark. That's the confidence people would need to have in us, that we would provide them with the information that they need. Next up is
Too fast. Special education.
special education. So this is just totally specialized for individual students. They come with individual needs, as we know. That's why they have IEPs. So we have to make sure that we have safety procedures in place for all of our students. Some of our special education students are very involved, have very serious medical conditions. So how do we work with those families and those students to make sure that they're taken care of and that it's safe for them to be here? We also have some serious, significant behavioral issues with some students. You know, and I was joking with people earlier. I mean, there's a reason why we have assistant principals in schools, because even though we have rules, we know that we have a lot of kids, because they're kids, that don't follow rules. So if we make rules around wearing masks, or we make rules around one-way hallways, or any kind of rules, we know we're going to have a significant group of kids, because they're kids, break rules. That's what kids do. So we have to be honest with ourselves to say that even if we set these things in place, we have to be prepared for when kids don't do that. So when a little kid, 5 years old, throws a tantrum and throws his mask off and runs out of the classroom and is crying, you know, and we have to deal with them, because that's part of what you do with 5-year-olds. We have to be prepared to handle those types of situations, because that's what happens in an elementary school. Same thing can happen in a high school. Usually it's not a tantrum, but it's basically a kid getting very upset about something and walking out of a classroom and going to wherever they need to go to calm down, whether that's the bathrooms or even leaving campus sometimes. So I mean, what I want to make sure we communicate to you is, we can have the best laid plans in terms of how we're going to do all of this stuff, but please remember that we're dealing with kids, and kids are going to do what kids do. I mean, we have a hard enough time sometimes with adults, and just keeping the adults to do the things that we need them to do with this. So just be aware of that. I would not want to say to our community that we have put everything in place to keep kids completely safe, because that would not be a fair or true message. Because at any given moment, kids can congregate, kids will get together, kids will high five, kids will hug and do all the different things that they haven't been able to do for the last 4 months. Moving on.
Social emotional.
So social emotional needs, this is really about how do we really handle and continue to work with our kids and families, regardless if we're remote or in person. If we bring kids back, we have kids back at school that haven't been in school for 6 months at this point. So we really need to focus, you know, on taking care of them in terms of the social emotional needs. We can't just jump right into academics and expect them to sit at their seat for 6 hours and do academic work. We need to really work hard at making sure that we do those other things that we need to do first, so that they're capable of learning. And then for those kids that are in the remote setting, we need to make sure we reach out to them even more than we did previously, so they're not as, you know, isolated or feeling that way. We just need to do as much as we can to help all kids and families in those areas. And luckily, we have the Office of School Wellness, so Barbara and her team are all over this. So Barbara's in charge of this area for sure. So that's good.
Operation and finance.
So operations and finance, and this, you know, this is more Jefferson's area for sure, but this is just about how do we fund all the things that we need to do to make it as safe as possible for kids. Not only do we have the safety issues we have to deal with, but we also have the learning loss issues we have to deal with. So how do we leverage the funds that we have so we can do tutoring for kids that we need to, remediation for the younger kids that we need to do, and provides many opportunities for kids to pass their classes at the high school for sure. That's a big issue. How do we get these kids to succeed? If we go back into a remote setting, how do we do more for them than we were able to do in the spring? How do we make it even better if we can? But that's what the operations and finance piece is about. Certainly the board has control over the major finances and how you're going to leverage that money to help us do what we need to do.
And then food service.
Food service, Brenda and I have talked quite a bit. In a remote setting, we're nailing it. We're serving 900 meals every day. We're serving food all summer. These guys have been rock stars. But in the fall, if we have half the kids at home, say, and half the kids at school, how do we manage that? How do they provide both in school and then meals to the community on the buses at the same time? Brenda and I have had a couple conversations about that, about what that might look like. Does she need more help to do that? What's the timing of it all? Does she do the buses at the high school run in the morning? Does she do the buses on the elementary run in the morning? Does she do a special run after the kids are already here in school? How do you manage that? It's a timing issue. How do you provide all those meals at the same, simultaneously? So a lot to figure out there. And she'll with the team will figure it out once she knows what it is she's preparing for. And then once again, we'll have to be ready to change it on the spot. So that if we change from remote to in person, she's ready to go. Or if we change from in person to remote, she's ready to go.
Next is communications.
I think communications is the biggest key. How do we continue to communicate to the public, to our families? How do I communicate to you? How do you guys help communicate with your constituents? How does the admin team communicate with each other and with our staff? I think at this point we're doing a fairly good job of getting information out to people. I have not heard from anyone thinking that we haven't got information out to them. I will continue to do what I've been doing with staff, which is a Friday memo to staff saying this is where we're at. The school board will continue to get the emails from me of any pertinent information that comes up that's important. The community will continue to hear from me at least every other week with important information. I don't want to send something out without something to say, because they'll stop listening. It's only important when we have something important to say. But it's all laid out there. And then the communication piece is going to be really around how do you communicate once things potentially where you get an illness or you get someone with a positive COVID test, and how does that communication piece work, and who knows who does what when, and all that kind of stuff. People want to know about how that's going to work. So.
And I think playing on that, Dan, I think part of that through the governor's plan for a communication plan to be set up by school board falls right into this.
Absolutely does, yeah.
So
So we're already starting to do that. That's what this is about.
Right.
So we're already on that. So I think that's the last section.
No, it's scheduling and attendance is last, but that is the last one after that.
Yeah.
Scheduling and attendance.
So scheduling and attendance is more of a building by building issue, so I won't waste too much time, but it's really around how you organize yourselves for whatever scenario you're in. And the attendance piece is more about how do you determine whether a student's attending or not. If we have kids at home, kids at school, we weren't having school every day. Sometimes it was check-ins once or twice a week. For the spring, we just marked everybody present because we had no other better way of doing it, for lack of a better way of saying it. The least dangerous assumption was to assume that every kid was present and participating. We did have our counselors reaching out to kids and families we hadn't heard from. We had spreadsheets of kids and families where we were tracking that sort of stuff. But we need to do a more robust job now of how do we determine attendance and how do we determine whether a kid's participating or not. So that's something that we need to tighten up as well. So I did get a couple texts here. Brenda is amazing. That's our food service director from a parent. And thank you to all of us. And I think, Tim, that's all I had on that part.
do you want to touch a little bit, Dan, the discussion you've had with some of the other school districts dealing with the school calendar?
Sure. So the school calendar is in the board's purview, as you know. So we go by right now a 180-day calendar. You have changed that to hours, instructional hours, the last couple of years because of snow days. You have the ability to change your calendar anytime that you want. There's been a lot of talk with the other superintendents of pushing back the start of school. Perhaps after Labor Day, so that if you need more teacher professional days up front to prepare for whatever the reality is going to be, that we would do that. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that if there is a hybrid option that we're going to try and do, or if there's something where we feel like our staff needs more time than the 2 regular days that we usually do, that we would come back to you and say, recommending a change in the calendar. And whether that change is just to add a couple of professional development days and push the last day of school back, we may do that. We may say, let's go to instructional hours and not days, and push a couple days of PD time up front, but leave the end of the year the same. So there's just a lot of options for you to consider. You're not tied into your current calendar just because you've approved it, I guess is the point I need to make. I think it's too early to figure that out, so I'm not suggesting that you would do anything with that now, but just know it's an option for you as we get closer to the start of school, and if we need more time to get ready, we take advantage of that time, and we can push it back, not only for kids, but we can push it back for staff too. We don't have to have our opening day August 31st for kids. We can push it back if we have to, and we can provide more time up front for teachers if we need to too.
All right, does anybody have any questions for the superintendent about the fall opening plan review and the update that he's given to us? Are there any questions? Okay, I don't see any online. I have none within. Oh, go ahead, Deb.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. With the transportation, is there a possibility to, if we were to be in school and not remote, has there been consideration with the bus routes running as normal, but having them, say if you can only have 24 kids, the bus route would start on the 24th kid, the bus would then go to the school, drop them off, then come back to that spot where they ended and continue for the next 24. Is that something that could be a potential? Or is that, I don't know how long your bus routes are or time of one bus route?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a logical scenario. You know, if that was something that we had to decide today, I think that makes sense. I think that there's some potential that they may be able to squeeze a couple more buses for us so that we wouldn't need to do that. I'll know more about that as we get closer to opening. You know, the fact that we can have siblings sitting with each other may really work in our favor. I think that if we can offer some kind of on-site before school care and get some more parents that can drop kids off at school before work may help with that issue as well. So I think there's a few different scenarios that we can look at to try and reduce the amount of kids that we need to have on buses. So I think we should look at all those avenues.
How many kids ride the buses now from last year?
That's a good
question. Like any given route, how many kids are on those, on each bus?
So we run 5 buses for each of our runs. And I would say we average about 50 kids on a bus for the runs. And we do, remember we do middle and high school together, and then we do elementary separately. So I would guesstimate we have at least 500 kids riding the bus, probably a little bit more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you all set, Deb? Any other questions?
I'm good.
Thank you. Susan, do you have any questions? Thank you, Susan. Does anybody in the library have any questions for the superintendent? Chris?
Yeah, maybe Toby can talk about this. Do we have a specific infection control or infection prevention plan in place, procedures in place for surface contact precautions? I don't know if Toby has any specifics from the vendors that he meets with and what instructions.
I've lost you. I lost that whole last half, what you said, Chris.
Okay, so I don't know if you've met with vendors and what they're recommending for surface precautions, infection prevention procedures, what the products that they provide, like in between change of classrooms.
That's actually what these sprayers are that I purchased. It's a spray disinfectant. All these sprays coming out now are for this COVID virus, and but they're a special sprayer. They're electrostatic. I have to get, like I said, get the pamphlet for the full name, but that's what these sprayers are for. So you just spray that classroom down, and 10 minutes later it's disinfected. I'm on a group with the facilities directors, and basically these are what are being used by everybody.
Who's going to carry out these procedures between classrooms?
Our custodians, and that's where the extra staff would have to be, and we got to talk about how to schedule that, because obviously even if I add more custodians, you got to go through every classroom between each class. So that's something we definitely got to discuss how we'd have to do that. But for speed, that's what these sprayers are for. And then, like I said, if I get 1 to 2 more custodians, I don't know. That's what we got to figure out on attendance, how many kids we're going to have, how many classrooms we're going to have, how much staff I got to have to be able to effectively do that, and do the bathrooms in between all this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what's in discussion. But that's what these sprayers are for to start with.
Okay. Thanks, Toby.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dan, for that update. Appreciate it. Did you want to just touch on the classes?
Yes, so we did break down the survey, and we don't need to go through it, I just wanted you to have access to it. We broke the survey down by grade levels, so we would get a little bit of a sense of, at each grade level, how many parents were saying kids would be home versus how many kids would be in school. It played out pretty much the way we thought it would. You can look at, like, was there more kids at the high school staying home, or were there more kids at the middle school staying home? The next step for us, once we get closer to the opening of school, would be to really reach out to every parent, and at some point, if we're going to open, and the board decides we're going to open, is to say to each parent, you need to let us know if you're coming or not, or if you're going to stay remote. And we need to have those answers so that we can really then plan exactly what we're going to do and what we need to provide. This was to get a good sense at this point of the summer, what it's looking like. So this does give us a good sense from planning purposes, but to actually sit down and do bus routes, and actually sit down and do classes and plan for remote instruction versus in person, we're going to need to reach out to every family and get that information from them. So the way I see this starting to play out a little bit is, the board has not had any conversation tonight about how you're leaning and all, and that's okay, because it's only July 13th. So whether you have that conversation or not, that's up to you. On August 3rd, when we come back together again, I'll have more updates for you on where we're at. I probably at that point would have a lot to say about what the governor has provided to us and what we've done with our plans based on what the governor has said to us, and would potentially even gathered some of that information from parents that we would need. We have the August 3rd date, we have the August 17th date for our regular board meeting. My assumption is that you'll make a decision at some point in that time frame. Whether or not you decide to push back the opening of school or not would be made at that point in time as well, so parents would have a few weeks' notice either way. So we will make these decisions when we need to. At some point, though, the board will need to guide us in terms of how deeply into something you want us to get, so we don't set parents up for something that's not gonna happen, I guess is what I wanna make sure we don't do. So, I don't know if you wanna talk a little bit about that now, you haven't said much tonight, so.
I'm up in the air, 50-50.
Paul's 50.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, that's a big help.
Appreciate it.
I guess the thing, as I said earlier, is that we're still under the unknown of what's going to be coming forward from the governor, and what this report holds. There's still a lot of unknown here of where we're going to be leaning, and I think a lot of the school districts that I've had the opportunity to read on and some of the school board minutes of other school boards are kind of in the same position. In reaching out to the New Hampshire School Board Association, they're kind of waiting, even though the executive director sat on the committee, task force for the reopening of schools, I still feel that there's not enough information for us to make a solid decision, and I think we're kind of jumping the gun when we have another 7 weeks, and we also have that opportunity, we have the authority to push the start of school out if we wanted to, okay? And I think when it comes to the safety of the children of this community and our staffing, that making these kind of decisions this early is premature on our part as a school board, because we're not do not have all the information that we need to make an informed decision of how we want to go about doing this. So my recommendation, and I'm just making it as a chair, my recommendation is that we don't make any decisions tonight, because we don't have all the information that we need. But obviously, this is a voice of 9 on this board, so motions can be made and votes can be taken, but I know personally I won't vote for anything that falls with either opening or not opening the schools. I will make a no vote on it whenever a motion comes up, because I don't feel I have enough information to make that kind of decision on whether to open school or not. And when we're talking the safety of 1,000 children, okay, that are the most important decisions that we're making, and not to mention the staffing and the fact that what could happen. I just don't feel that we're ready. I'm not ready to make the decision yet, but we are a board of 9, so whatever decision you want to make, I'll support the decisions, but I won't vote yes for opening the schools.
As some of you know, I do research for taxpayers in various states in the Northeast. And what the biggest concern is, and it hasn't been addressed this evening by anyone, or even in the lengthy plan for reopening, is maintaining enrollment. That is going to be especially a serious issue for all school boards, all school districts, but especially for Franklin. The 40% said they're doing remote learning, when I think I read an email that the average response was 30% of the districts, the parents in the other districts, were saying remote learning. So there's a 10% differential. Why does Franklin have that 10% differential? And I think that is where you need to focus. What is different about Franklin? Pick any subject you want or any topic you want, but there's something different about Franklin to have a 10% differential from the others. I mentioned to Tim the other day, I chatted with him at the cemetery, that I now belong to 120 Facebook social groups of municipalities. And there is a propensity, I coined the word way back last November and used it at the December meeting, reactionary demographics. What is the propensity for anecdotal information to actually portray off into final results? 20% of the high school did not graduate this year. For what reason? I'm not privy to that information, but I think somebody needs to analyze why 10% chose not to do their work when they had ample time to do their work. Enrollment, I forgot the due date for the average daily membership for our income from our revenue from the state. But I think we need to follow what path that will increase or hold our average daily membership for that day and count. $4,500 per student, somewhere in that range. You lose 10 students, you lose $45,000. Do that twice and you've lost a teacher. I don't have an idea of what the best plan is. I'm only making everyone aware this evening that there probably will be an enrollment decline. The DOE already said in a 7-year plan there would be a 10% decline in enrollment in public schools. Now we're dealing with other matters and social issues that also affect enrollment in public schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Is there anybody else who wants to bring anything, their view of how they feel on this item tonight by board members? Okay, I see nobody on the line. Hello.
It's Jefferson, I believe.
Jefferson, are you trying to come on?
He lost power, so he's coming back.
Oh, okay. All right, so no, Deb and Susan Halleck look like they're all set. They have no comments to make. Does anybody in the library have any further comments or any statements they'd like to make about this? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close that item now of agenda item 5, agenda item 5. We're going to go to agenda item 6, even though on the agenda it says 7, it should be 6. And that is late items. Superintendent, do you have any late items?
The only late item I have is the bus company has asked me if they could host their drivers in our middle school gymnasium for a meeting on August 13th. It's an hour-long training session. And I said that I didn't believe, as long as they social distance and mask like we've been doing with everyone else, I said that would be fine. But I said, let me double check with the board. So unless you have objections, I'm going to allow them to use the Franklin Middle School.
How many do they have there?
It's under 50. I think they said 46, 47.
And they're going to adhere to the rules of the
They'll
distancing?
adhere to our rules. So
Okay.
But I think that would be good.
Which would include being very careful on our brand new, which you may want to check, gym floor on the way out. You can shave it and it's so clear. It's beautiful. They've refinished the floor.
They'll be in the gym or the auditorium?
Have them take their shoes off when they come in.
They'll be in the gym or the cafeteria?
Oh, maybe we'll put them in the high school cat.
That's it, there you go.
The high school. Has the high school been done as well?
I don't know. All I can tell you is
I don't want to ruin a new floor.
It's as good as it looked last year.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, we may not be using it at all.
We'll find a good location for them. How's that?
Yeah, it's been a lot of work on it tonight. Yeah. I was thinking of going to the cafeteria. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. But when you say gym, I'm like,
but the cafeteria is very busy. It's all staged for their trip.
We'll probably do it at the high school. We'll figure it out.
Thank you.
That's the only late item I had.
Do you have any emails or phone calls that have come into you, Superintendent?
Emails? Look. Okay, let's see. I have one parent that emailed me. So this parent is asked to stay anonymous, but had some ideas for the fall. Says, my daughter did very well with remote learning and is actually hoping to keep doing it. However, I know there are a lot of kids that really struggle with it. I think some kids need the structure and routine of getting up and going to school to learn. I also think kids do need social interaction with caution. You will also be considering a split remote and in-school learning plan for next year, whether it's rotating for different groups of kids or options for the parents to decide what capacity can be handled. Maybe looking at what kids did poorly during the remote learning to help determine part of who needs to be back in school learning. Not sure if you have decided what to spend the CARES Act money on, but I've heard of companies having a spray they can put on objects that keeps viruses away for months. You're using in the subways. Maybe the schools could be sprayed and HEPA filters could also be installed. Just some thoughts I wanted to share. That was from a parent. And somebody tried calling me, but that was. Looks like that's it, guys.
All right. That was the only one. The only one there, I have one other item on here under number 7. Other is Paul needed to step down off communications strategic due to a conflict of interest, and it just left Delaney and I. and we were moving into the fact that we need to come out with a communication plan. I need a volunteer of a school board member to come on and sit on the communication committee. So if anybody is interested, if you'd please let me know. It's important that we have someone on the communication along with Delaney and I. So, yeah, I don't need a decision now. We don't have a meeting for a couple weeks anyways, right, Delaney?
No, we haven't actually scheduled the next one.
Okay, we haven't scheduled one yet, so if someone has the time and would like to sit on the communication committee, please reach out to me and let me know. That's the only other item I have. Does anybody else have anything to bring before the
Yes.
board?
So for policy, don't we have to approve the, for allowing the Chromebooks to go out? I don't think we passed that, did we? Did we do second reading yet?
We'd have to look, and we'll have to schedule for August 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look up.
But I won't be here August 3rd. Well, I'm gonna be remotely, try
We can
to.
do it August 17th,
Or
that's the regular
17th, we got
meeting.
plenty of time.
17th I'll do it.
Just do it the 17th, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Paul, in case you didn't hear, Scott's question is about whether we've passed the second reading on allowing Chromebooks to go home or not. I can't remember whether we have or not. Dan's gonna look it up and we'll put it on our August 17th school board, regular school board meeting agenda at that time. All right. Is there any, on administration out on our Zoom feed, is there anything that you want to add to this meeting pertaining to anything we've gone over tonight? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much to all. I'll take a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Paul's made the motion to adjourn. Who do I have a second? We gotta take the roll call, but we gotta do this. Second by Scott Burns. Can I have a roll call vote on it?
Tim Dow,
Yes.
Scott Burns,
Yes.
Paul Doucette,
Yes.
Chris Nealon,
Yes.
Cecile Cormier,
Yes.
Jeff Savory,
Yes.
Susan Hallett Cook,
Yes.
Delaney Courier,
Yes.
Deb Brown.
Yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's unanimous. The meeting's adjourned. Just so everybody remembers, the next meeting is August 3rd at 6 o'clock. It'll be here in the library again. Thank you.
Thank you for the coffee.
Good night, everyone.